All right. Okay, many of us do not want to think about the end time of our careers because we might be employees who are not prepared and we see those years rushing toward us. Or on the other hand, we might be employers and we see the talent that we've harnessed over the years. We see them walking through the gate with all the knowledge and skills that have kept our businesses alive over the years. So today, we are pleased. We have brought in Dr. Malaika Edwards. She's the HR practitioner, and she'll be talking to us about some of these issues. All right, Malaika Edwards provides advisory services about continuity for organizations that are wrestling with the problem of retiring employees. She guides organizations in how to harness and harvest the knowledge and skills that they need in order to keep themselves going. Dr. Edwards is an assistant professor at SUNY Empire State College, having earned her PhD at Louisiana State University. But she's not just an academic. She has years of practical experience in HR in some of Jamaica's finest companies. She's worked at the Jamaica National Building Society, at Grace Kennedy Remittance Services, and at Nestle Jamaica. Malaika Edwards, thank you so much for joining us here on Caribbean HRD TV. It's sort of coming back home.
I know, that's how it feels. That's how it feels. I'm so excited. Yeah, it is coming back home because I should mention, of course, I did my bachelor's at UWI. And then I started
in this department.
Yeah. And I also did a year of my PhD at UWI. So it really feels like coming back home. So I'm really very excited to talk to you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, wonderful. All right, but the first question I want to ask is, how did you, a young person, become interested in a topic like this? Retirement?
No, that's a good question, and I've gotten that question, like, why would you focus on that? But it goes back, you mentioned that I worked in corporate. So what happened is, over the years, I would have situations where employees would be retiring. And the truth is, initially, I didn't think much of it. I just thought, this is exciting, you're going to retire. And we would have a retirement party, or we would bring back our retirees and, have them for luncheon. And in one instance, I had 2 employees who were slated for retirement. One was excited, finally getting to leave. And the other one, there was a sense of panic and dread.
Okay.
The employee was not ready and asked, like, can I stay because I'm not ready, I cannot afford to leave. And the other employee who was excited, the organization was experiencing panic because this was a very, very senior member of the organization. And persons were like, what are we going to do if they leave? We cannot afford to lose these skills. And it was at that point in time that I was seeing right there 2 ends of the spectrum. And I thought, all these years, I didn't realize how much of an impact it would have had on the employee, and how much the business had been impacted by all of these persons who might have left. And so I said, this is something that I have to explore. And the fact is, globally, we're having so many changes where aging is concerned. Population aging is a major factor, and we are going to see a lot of changes. We are experiencing the changes. So a combination of my practical experience, plus seeing what's happening on a global scale, I said, this is something that is important, and I have to explore it and see how best we can manage it.
Okay.
So that's where it stems from.
Sorry, when we speak about an aging workforce, what exactly do we mean?
We're really just looking at the fact that our workers are getting older. So population aging is speaking to the fact that persons within the population are getting older, and then it stems and it affects the organization. So our workers are getting older, and we're going to have, and we are having, an increase in the number of older persons in the workforce. And this is for a number of reasons. Persons are living longer, and so they either want to work or have to work longer. Persons, in some instances, can't afford to retire. And so we have older persons who have to either remain in the workforce or they've left, and then they need to re-enter. And we have instances where people can afford to retire. They don't want to. There's no joy, no fulfillment in retirement, and so they want to work. So we find that we have older persons in the organization, in the workforce, and so we see an aging of the workforce on account of those factors.
All right, did you study anything to kind of predict what, I mean, how do I know, aside, I suppose, from the economic thing, how do I know if I'm ready for retirement?
How
I
do
mean,
you know?
yeah, you're a psychologist as well, so how do you know what is the psychological profile of somebody, because I can imagine that there are people who've given their all to the organization. If the organization is afraid of them leaving, it is because they're that kind of employee. So, what is the profile?
So in terms of being ready for retirement, it's two things. By law, the law kind of says you are ready. So
Yes,
that's one
yes.
thing to consider. From the individual perspective, people have to kind of stop, and I use the term take stock of their personal situation. Do I really want to leave? Am I ready to leave? And it really becomes a personal thing. You do an assessment of where you are, what you want, and am I ready? Do I actually work workforce? Am I at the point where I feel I've contributed? I don't want to do anymore and I'd like to exit. We use a term, what we call the final five. And we say that during those last 5 years before you're slated for retirement, and I say slated because the law states, then during those last 5 years, persons do a self-assessment. And that's how you know if you're ready. And that self-assessment is, as I've mentioned, looking at where I am in terms of my work, looking at where I am in terms of life, what I want from life. Have I given all that I think I can give? Is there more that I want to do? Are there other things that I'd like to explore? Are there other careers that I'd like to do? All of those questions persons ask themselves to determine, do I actually want to retire? Now, some persons ask themselves a question and they are sure, this is enough and I would like to retire. I want to go and do something else. And there are other persons who feel a sense of dread and panic because they don't feel like they've contributed, or they've been working for such a long time and so connected to the workplace, to the roles that they've had, to the things that they've been doing, that they don't feel like they're ready and they want some more time. So it really is a very personal self-assessment. There's no one thing that says, yes, this person is ready. No, that person is not ready. You do an assessment and make that determination, and then you move from there on your own. You make that decision, and based on the organization that you work with and things of that nature.
But all right, you're talking about the fact that some people may not be ready and want to continue, or they can, even if they can afford, as I said, putting the economics aside, even if they can leave, they don't want to leave. So from the perspective of the organization, it would mean that an organization would have to keep them on, or they would have to start their own business or go into voluntary service or something like that. But what are the myths about employing older workers? Because I know that you have a lot of discrimination about ageism and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So there's the myth, there are lots of myths associated with it. And one that immediately comes to mind is that persons get to a particular age and they physically cannot continue, or mentally the cognitive capacity is not there. And the argument sometimes is, oh, he or she's of a certain age, we can't hire them because they can't work. He or she's of a certain age, they're going to get sick. It's going to be a cost to us. We can't hire them. Or the mental capacity, they're not going to be able to concentrate. The truth is, those things can happen to persons at any age. A 25-year-old is not necessarily going to be fitter than someone who is 55. The research shows us that a lot of these things just are not true. So that is a myth just in terms of the physical capacity of an individual, the cognitive capacity. There's also the big one that it doesn't make sense to employ someone who is older because we're in a technological age. Everything is technology, everything is social media, and older persons will not be able to adapt. Big myth, right? It's the story out there, but it just is not necessarily true. It can apply to any age. And I hear it all the time that we can't hire persons because of this reason or because of that reason. It's not necessarily true. A lot of research debunks those things and shows us that you don't have to have cognitive decline just because you've gotten to age 65, age 70. A lot of persons are functioning, and a lot of persons, that's when they get their quote unquote second win, and they function so much better at that later stage in life than they'd been doing at 25, 30 years old. So the myth is there, but it certainly is not something that I certainly do encourage persons to subscribe to that. It really only affects the organization if we go that route.
And it affects the rest of the society too, because I actually had a student, I was marking exam papers the other day. I had a student tell me that one of the solutions to Jamaica's employment problem is to drop the retirement age by 5 years. Of course, she just got 0.
We have to advise persons. There are a lot of thoughts about what is best for employment, what is best for an organization. There's no one size, there's no one way. So what can work for organization A in terms of the kind of employee that they need to hire is not necessarily going to work for organization B. And if there is an issue, if there is this myth about, and I use a technology for instance, and the myth that we can't hire because of technology, let's put things in place so that even if we do hire for the skill and there is a gap where technology is concerned, then we can train and close that gap. So, there are always ways to remedy situations if we believe that the situation exists.
Okay. So tell me now, what are the benefits of employing older persons?
Oh, wow, so many benefits. So let's talk about the fact that someone who is older has acquired years of knowledge and experience.
Sometimes. Yeah, because it could be the same year of experience 60 times over,
It could be the same. But the fact is that if you've been working for a long time, there's life skills that you've had that just by virtue of being a certain age, you are going to have certain life skills that can benefit the organization. So there's life skills, there's work skills. There is a fact that if you've been dealing with something and you have knowledge in a particular area, you can apply that knowledge to things that are currently happening in your organization. I think of things like mentorship, and there's a significant benefit where mentorship is concerned, because we have younger persons who can learn from their older counterparts, right? There's a significant benefit where mutual mentorship is concerned and persons in different age groups can work together. There's benefit in terms of just different perspectives. So someone who is older, there's a benefit in hiring that person because the perspective that they will have, the outlook that they will have, it will be different, it can be different, but it's not necessarily bad. There's a benefit because we have different perspectives and those different perspectives can benefit the organization. So there's knowledge, there's skills, there's perspectives. And a lot of the research shows that in terms of work and traits and characteristics, older persons bring different traits and characteristics to the workplace than their younger counterparts. Things like commitment to the organization, things like discipline, things like dedication. Not saying that younger persons don't have that. We can't say things of that nature, but we find that more older persons will have those kind of characteristic traits, and that can benefit the organization. So those are some of the benefits right there that we can capitalize on.
All right, so then how do you recommend that organizations manage their multi-generational workforce, and how do you recommend that they go about with succession planning?
So for succession planning, my initial recommendation is to be very deliberate about how we do succession planning. And another recommendation that I always have is don't restrict succession planning only to certain groups within the organization. So in terms of being deliberate, we have to be very mindful of when we start our succession planning process. I find a lot of time as HR professionals, we have so much doing, so much is happening, that succession planning sometimes is not even the kind of focus and attention that it needs. And it doesn't happen as quickly or as far in advance as we need to happen. So when we talk about the succession planning, we have to make sure that we start early. We have to make sure that we identify the positions in organizations that would require successors, identify the successors, and put training in place. And as I mentioned, be mindful of which positions we're focusing on. I know that we often focus on just our senior management team, which is fine, that's absolutely critical. But we have other positions in the organization that if we have someone leave and we don't have someone to fill that gap, there is going to be an impact on the organization. And so we have to focus on them as well. Tier 1 employees, Tier 2, Tier 3, focus on all levels. Be mindful that it's going to be a different kind of plan, a different kind of strategy, depending on the level, but we have to focus on all levels. So that's one thing right there. I think I missed your other part in terms of succession planning.
Yeah, but the multi-generational workforce, but I think you've sort of talked about that as well. Because
so managing
to have, as you say, to have just a cohesiveness within the organization. You talked about mutual mentorship and
the mutual mentorship. That's the reverse mentorship is one thing, and having younger persons mentor their older colleagues, I think that's really, really good, and I support it. And that helps in terms of making sure that everybody in the organization can work together. And it feels good for younger persons to know that I can work with an older person. And the older I had a colleague, she was in her 60s at the time. Her greatest joy was working on teams with persons who are 25 years old. She was like, the things that she learned from them, she's not going to learn it otherwise. She was excited. That's reverse mentoring right there. And that's how HR can manage multi-generational workforce. And again, there's a mutual mentorship that helps us to manage, put different persons on projects to work together. Mix your teams, mix your projects, have persons from different age groups and manage it in that way so that regardless of age, persons can work together. I think it has to also be a mindset change that yes, we have persons from different age groups, but that's fine. Let's not pit one age group against the other. Let's value and recognize the benefits of different employees, of different age groups. Embrace the diversity and embrace the difference, and that helps in terms of how we can manage different age groups and employees.
Yeah, because I was thinking, that was actually what I was thinking, that this is also a diversity issue. And we're told that, doing the diversity thing in our organizations is going to help us actually achieve our mission. So yes, that is actually, so that is one of the other benefits the club mentioned,
Yeah, yeah, well, you did. Yeah, absolutely. Diversity. And it helps. The diverse workforce, whether it is age diversity, diversity in terms of place of origin, diversity where gender is concerned, all of those things help in terms of meeting our business objectives. If we have everybody who is the sameness is not going to necessarily help us. Different perspectives help the organization, and it helps your employees to build skills, to work together, and to grow.
All right, my last question to you then would be, as somebody who is actually studying in this area, that we HR, what would you suggest? What would you recommend that our students coming up behind you, how would they do this? How can they help you to get your message across?
Students in terms of the workplace?
Well, yeah, remember our students are the HR, our students would be the HR managers and the HR practitioners, the trainers. Our students would be doing all of that sort of thing. Our students are the bedrock of the HR departments in an organization.
So I think for persons who are coming up, the HR practitioners know your students. I think part of it is recognizing that we have this change. So that's the first thing, that they themselves have to recognize that we have this change and look and see what the change is like in their respective industries, in their respective workplaces, and then strategize in terms of how it is that we're going to meet and respond to this change. I think HR has a very, very big opportunity in terms of what do we do at our local level to embrace the diversity and to start things like, how do we recruit differently to ensure that we have a mixed workforce? What do we do differently to ensure that we can retain a diverse set of employees? I think, for instance, and I look at recruitment where HR is concerned, and we have to think about things like our recruitment strategy. And as HR professionals, we have the opportunity to change the strategy that we use to ensure that we have diversity in the workplace. So look at things like where it is that we're posting our advertisements, where it is that we're going to seek our employees. What does our ad look like? Is it the ad that we use to attract someone who's in their 20s, a recent graduate? It's not going to be the same kind of ad that we're using to attract someone who is over 50. We look at things like HR has an opportunity to adjust benefits. What kind of benefits do we have in the organization so that we can attract and retain someone who's 25 as opposed to someone who is 55? So I think for your students coming up and for the HR practitioners who are coming up, it's about starting and being a voice in the organization to show that this is what is happening. The world is changing. We have a changing workplace. The Caribbean is going to change and is changing because of that. Jamaica is going to change and is changing because of that. And I've seen different organizations that are actively working towards the diversity, actively working towards changing their recruitment strategy. And I think if we just continue trickling and having that spread across different companies, I think that's a great opportunity. And the message is there. It starts from HR to show that this is what the change is going to be. I think that's what we can do.
Okay, thank you so much, Malaika Edwards. Thank you so much for joining us here on Caribbean HRD TV.
Thank you, Olivine. It was good to talk to you.
Okay, wonderful. Bye.